Happy New Year. We made it to another year. Something I never take for granted as a minister who has had the task of burying the very young alongside the very old. You and I have made another revolution around the sun together. Today is filled with the promise of 360 plus days, and we get an extra day because it's a leap year. Happy birthday to those of you who will age 4 years this year. We also find ourselves at the beginning of a new decade. So psychologically, time stretches out before us and behind us in ways that make us even more aware of all that can happen, given enough days and enough years. Life is not static. What is different about you today than 10 years ago? What is different in your body, with your mind, or with your spirit? What is different in your family or in your community? What is different in our shared nation or our shared world? In part, we show up in religious community together as a natural response to the fact that we as human beings are both born and fated to die. We come here to make sense of all that happens between those two realities and to support each other on life's journey. When I look back 10 years, I was someone's child. My mother was still alive, and she had just moved in with us here in Morristown. My mother is now gone, and I have become a mother of a child who plays in the room where my mother once lived. Birth and death. It is the natural cycle of the world that we live in. In the first week of 2020, we are waking up every day to fires burning across Australia and the loss of 500 million animals and the potential extinction of some species that only reside in Australia. People have perished as well. The brush fires are another alarm that we must resolve to use the resources of our planet differently for the sake of life itself, not just life as we know it. In the first week of 2020, we are also waking up to our president and his counselors ordering a drone strike which killed the second highest leader in Iran, General Soleimani. Vengeance is on the lips of many. Some of us wonder, as we have wondered before, will this be the action that tips us towards another war? Human history is sadly peppered with wars that exact a costly toll on human life. The technology that we possess to be able to wipe one another off the face of the planet, whether one person or a dozen or millions, that is also an alarm that we must resolve to invest in more powerful peace measures and not just weapons. This year, I find myself drawn less towards making a particular set of resolutions about my health or my activities, and more towards gaining a greater perspective, which I hope will help me to make meaning and make wiser choices in these turbulent times. Throughout this year, we are exploring origin stories and stories of creation in our worship and in our covenant circles as a source of meaning and inspiration. There is no story that fills me more with reverence and awe than the story of how we came into being in the first place. That is to say, the scientific theory of creation. In fact, I believe it was the very Sunday that I first learned about the Big Bang in the 5th grade in church school, before I learned about it in school, that I vowed I would never miss another Sunday. And I've been pretty faithful to that vow. I want to invite you. Let us stretch our minds to imagine existence 13.7 billion years ago. It's amazing that our minds can do that. When there was nothing, a nothing that contained everything. The universe was infinitely small, hot, and dense, vastly smaller than the dot over the I in the word infinite. The dot contained the 4 forces of nature, which are the weak force, the strong nuclear force, gravity, and electromagnetism. They were all combined as one super force in which space and time didn't function as they do today. All of a sudden, gravity split off from that universalist singularity and set off a chain of events. It began to cool and set off a burst of energy, a big bang, which fueled hyper-expansion, and the universe began to stretch out. Within less than a second, the other 3 forces separated, and as of that point, the laws of nature behaved consistently and constantly in the ways that they do today. 3 minutes, only 3 minutes into our universe's history, when things had cooled down to a mere 1 billion degrees Fahrenheit, hydrogen and helium atoms began to form. 380,000 years later, the Lord said, "Let there be light." Oh, wait, that's a different story, but I do enjoy the parallels. 380,000 years later, light first traveled through the vast expanse of what up to that point was uniform, cold, and dark. We can still hear the echoes of the burst of radiation that came from that moment. In fact, it was 2 scientists working at Bell Labs, a place that some of you worked, who first heard it. You know, when you turn on the television and it isn't tuned into a channel, or you turn into a channel on the radio and you hear that crackling? It turns out that is the echoes of the beginning, that sound. 1 billion years later, the first stars take shape in the heavens, producing heavier elements like nitrogen, oxygen, and carbon. 9 billion years later, matter and gravity combine to form a typical star. Due to a process called thermonuclear fusion, stellar outflow leads to the formation of planets and moons. One of those planets has temperatures that are just right for water to collect and form into oceans and rivers and lakes. Under the water, mysterious and magnificent chemical reactions take place which form DNA and other proteins, the building blocks of life. These alive beings reproduce consistently until they don't. And a flaw that somehow works leads to a new form of life. Those new beings also reproduce consistently until they don't, and a change once again leads to a new being. Eventually, through a process of evolution, these beings include life that inhabits the waters and life on dry land. One day in recent cosmic history, a creature came to be that held the power of speech and naming. It named itself human, And it started naming all the other animals and plants on Earth. The early humans stared up at the starry night and basked in the glow of that warm sun and wondered, why were we chosen to witness such a spectacular show? Why were we chosen to bear witness to such immeasurable suffering? And they felt that the fates of beauty or brokenness were right there in the stars. It must be the gods up there, they thought, who have chosen us as the center of their activity. We will revolve around them as they revolve around us. These humans wrote many stories about creation and their wonderings about how it all began. And what does it all mean? We still tell many of them to this day and reshape these stories in ways that shed light on what we cherish. Today we know that we are not the center of the universe. She is old and vast. She is 13.7 billion years old and 93 billion light years across. It turns out that the stars can be seen from any planet, not just ours. It turns out that the sun and the moon and the stars don't revolve around us. We revolve around the sun, which is an ordinary star like a bajillion other stars in the Milky Way, which is one galaxy among a bajillion in the known universe, which is to say nothing about the unknown universe. Our universe continues to stretch and expand, and some scientists think that eventually it will rip apart into nothingness, millions of years into the future. Will our universe cease to exist? Was there a universe before ours that ultimately collapsed and we aren't the first universe? Are we the only life in the universe? There is so much that we still don't know and maybe never will, but it is human that we will try to figure it out. We are the creation of the universe wondering about itself. As I stare into the night sky in one of the too few places these days where we can still see the heavens, I wonder what we look like from one of those faraway places that I can see faintly in the distance. I realize that we are but a finite dot, like the dot of an eye from the perspective of the universe itself. But it doesn't make me feel small. It allows me to feel connected to the mystery and miracle of something so grand, so unlikely as our galaxy and all forms of life. While I may have no impact on the universe as a whole, the vision of her reminds me that I too am of stardust. You and I both come from stardust. We have within ourselves the ingredients to create beauty and life and meaning. We are capable of making a difference right here, today, in this room, and right here in this town, in this country, and in this world. As all the stars in the sky contribute to the beauty of the heavens, all of us on earth collectively can contribute to something larger than any one of us. I also realize that if there is life on another planet who is staring back at us with more advanced technology, or from the vantage point of the universe herself, maybe this is how we look. From up there looking down, we are a blue-green planet teeming with life. From up there are no lines between nations, just one world. You cannot see human-created borders. However, you might see smoke from brush fires and bombs. From up there, people look generally the same and would all have the same relative importance. From the perspective of our cosmos, our lives are a mere blink. And yet, our whole universe was created in a mere blink. Maybe that is the closest to God's perspective that we can get. We are finite, and all the same, relatively speaking. And yet, we are capable of sparking an infinitely creative range of possibilities. We have the power to create and the power to destroy. It is up to us. If there is a God at the beginning of everything, she does not move us like puppets. Although our choices may not matter to the cold, vast expanse, they matter a great deal to our lives, our families, and our neighbors, both near and far. Each one of us has one precious life. Actually, all we can really count on is one precious day, this day, in which to choose peace, choose love, choose to create art, beloved communities, and plant hope. None of us knows exactly what happened before the beginning, and none of us knows exactly how it will all end. What we do know is that we are here. That every one of us in this room made it to 2020. Hooray! And Happy New Year. And that all of us will leave traces of our lives that will echo as long as we are remembered. May that echo sound like the vibrations of love. And that will make all the difference.